All right, today we're going over metrics of progress and the importance of tracking them. So I have 3 different pages. We got body composition metrics, we have strength metrics, and then we have your cardiovascular and vitality metrics. There's different ways you can track certain things, and based on everyone's goals and what you want, whether it's more for your physique and what it looks like, if you want to be strong or you're a power lifter, you're just here to get longevity and lifespan. All these metrics have their place. Some of them you'll track no matter what you're trying to do, but these are all the metrics that I use, and I'm going to be going over them individually and hopefully help you guys decide on which ones are important to you. So with that, let's dive into it. So on the body composition metrics, the first one is weight and BMI. So this is basically the standard for tracking progress, but ultimately it's misleading due to lack of information. The scale does not show 5 pounds of muscle gained with 5 pounds of body fat lost. An example is like if you may not be losing weight and you're frustrated, but what you don't realize because you're not using other tracking metrics is that you are seeing progress. And we'll get into that. And then BMI is something that doctors use a lot, but it's misleading, and it's simply your weight in pounds divided by height in square meters. So if we look over here, you get a score based on your BMI, and which, like I said, weight and height determine that. And so you'll see later in my InBody that I am technically overweight, but I just have a lot of lean tissue relative to my body fat. So that's that. Everyone will be weighing in, and everyone should use weighing in. It's great to have that data, but you're going to want to add things. So let's get into progress pictures. Progress pictures are, you're just taking pictures. You could go every week, bi-weekly, every month, every 3 months. You know, it really depends on how your expectation of the weight that you're going to lose or gain. And it's a way to visually see physical changes in your body over time. So I have an example here. This is me in about 12 weeks. Is something that I was working towards. You kind of see here, this is 10 pounds difference. So I am 10 pounds lighter, and we're going to get into that. But you can see a lot of change here with just 10 pounds. And that's because, like I said, I maintained my muscle and only lost body fat because I had enough protein, and my nutrition, I would say, was on point for my goals. So we'll get kind of side view. You can see here, I did have abs, but I lost a lot of weight size. You can see a little more definition in like the chest. Legs not so much, but they're also not flexed. And then we have a rear position here. You can see a lot more definition in the arms. The waist tapers in more. And legs aren't flexed, so they don't really change much in these pictures. This is also poor lighting. So had I been using like actual lighting, you can see it's pretty shady. It's first thing in the morning. You'd see even more difference, but that's besides the point. So this is a great way. Everyone, in my opinion, should be using pictures to track their progress over time. It's extremely motivating when we see progress, right? Like, we want to create momentum. If we're just using a scale and the scale's not moving, we are going to lose motivation because we're working really hard and we're not seeing a difference. So that's why multiple metrics are important. All right, so next we're going to get into body measurements. Now, the context is different for everyone based on what your goals are. If you're a bodybuilder, you're probably going to want to see every aspect of your body changing, and you're going to want them to be proportional to each other if you're on stage or something like that. So you would measure, I mean, we're talking forearms, calves, waist in different areas, chest. But, you know, everyday people, we could use less measurements. And so this is kind of a chart. You can see an example here. You know, they go across the chest, the waist. So yeah, pretty simple. I'm not going to dive too much into it, but measurements are great especially if you're trying to build muscle and you want to know if like your arm is getting bigger. So measuring specific body parts every week or month is a way to track physical changes. So, you know, pictures is visually see the difference, And these body measurements are a way to physically change. So you can use different types of tools. So I have used this in the past. It's nice because it's digital. These little lines are hard to see. I used to be measuring my clients. It can be invasive. And like this is just a standard like little measuring tool for clothes and cutting crafts and things like that. You can use these. The great thing about this is you hit a button, it kind of tightens it up, and you don't need someone else. And then they also have like apps that track it for you. You don't have to use, one of these sheets. And these are relatively cheap. So these are really great, especially just for midsection, especially like everyday people. Most people trying to lose weight, it's in their kind of their glutes, their thighs, and their midsection where they carry their stored body fat. So it's really nice that if the scale doesn't change, not only are you physically seeing it, but you're visually seeing it as well. So these three are great to pair together. And then we have skin fold measurements. Now these are calipers that pinch subcutaneous fat at specific areas of the body. Using a formula based on measurements taken, you receive an estimate of body fat percentage. So with women's, it's different areas, and I'm not going to dive a bunch like really into this because not a lot of people are going to use it, and I'm going to try and keep this video relatively short. But there's different formulas, and this can be massively invasive for someone else, doing it to someone else. I have done this a few times, but as long as you're close with your clients, it's usually not too big of a deal. This is one of the forms of one of the devices. This is a cheap one. This is like $12. You can see it's a little kit on Amazon. It comes with that measuring tape for the body measurements. These, when I was an in-person trainer, I wanted the like gold standard of this. It was like $350. They use it in like labs, and doctors use it, but I'm glad I didn't spend the money because I changed, and we'll get into what I ended up using. So this is kind of the chart here. It's not going to be perfect unlike the body measurements where you're actually getting, as long as you're measuring in the same exact spot, and that is important, you're getting an actual number. With these skin fold measurements, it is an estimation. So it can be, a lot of people are like, well, this isn't accurate. And that's fine. It's not so much about accuracy. That's what these later down here, these gold standard devices are. It's about progress, right? We want to see progress over time. And the more metrics of progress we can measure that are different, maybe two of them aren't changing. Maybe our weight isn't changing. Maybe even our measurements aren't changing so much. But in the pictures, we can see definition. And in the skin fold measurements, we see a decrease in body fat, right? That average number, that score comes down. And that's what's important, is seeing the progress. So it's another tool that we can use. All right, next, this is the one that I've been lucky enough when I was an in-person trainer. I ran a gym out of my garage and trained clients. You can see in the YouTube videos I had a really nice setup, and I do miss it very much. But I had an InBody that I had purchased, and this device, it uses bioelectrical impedance. It sends a small electrical current through the body to measure body fat and muscle percentage. It basically separates the water that's stored in your muscle tissue from the body fat, and it uses that. And it's really great. But here's the thing. A lot of people will tell you how inaccurate these things are. Me personally, I feel as if I have less body fat than this InBody tells me. I would have... visibly I would look very lean, and the clients that I would have what I could tell visually they looked like they had more body fat, but they would have a better score. And also, based on how much water you drink, can really fluctuate your score, and I'll show you that later in these next pictures. But once again, are we seeing progress over time? And is it matching my other metrics that I'm using, right? And so I'm going to show you right here. So what I have is these are the sheets that it prints out, and I'm going to pair them with my pictures. So the important things we're going to be looking at here is these right here. So you have your total body water, you have your dry lean mass, so this is like actual muscle tissue without the water in it, you have your body fat mass, and you have your weight. And you can kind of see here, there wasn't much, I'm not seeing much progress, but over time, this is when in these pictures things started going really, really well here. So if you look, this one right here, I am weighing 194, 205 pounds. So about a 10-pound difference. We're going to go back. This is 10 pounds right here. I can see that. And then the other really cool thing that we're going to look at is the difference in my muscle tissue. 44.3, 44.1. I almost maintained my same amount of muscle that I had while in a deficit and losing body fat. My body fat came down from 39 pounds of body fat to 30 pounds of body fat. So by being able to use, I use the InBody, I use progress pictures, and I use the InBody has a scale. I don't use skin fold measurements, and I don't use, I don't measure my actual arms and things like that because it's not that important to me. So with just those two metrics, or those three metrics, I should say, what is matching, right? I have these progress pictures that I can go about and be like, wow, I really see a difference. And that's extremely motivating. So not everyone has access to these devices right here. Some gyms have them. You can get cheaper versions of them. Like they have scales. It's just a scale, and it has a Bluetooth, and it can go to your phone. Once again, people are going to say how they're not as accurate, but am I seeing progress, and is it matching my other metrics? And it was. So this is a really cool tool. And one more thing is, it's the water changes things, right? So you'll see a lot of these fluctuations in weight and muscle. Like obviously from 412 to 420, I did not gain almost 4 pounds of muscle. That's insane. And lose 2% body fat in a week, right? But we're going to look over time. What are we seeing? And I was doing these roughly every week, and you can see steady weight loss. But this last one that I had done, I'm showing that I lost a bunch of muscle, but in my future InBody, it props back up to an average, because 119 pounds of water and 120, that's almost a 2-pound water difference. So when you're low on water, you're going to read low in muscle tissue, and you're going to read higher in body fat. It's also the same if you work out right before. If we strength train, our muscle tissue is going to bring water into the tissue, and so you can kind of like cheat yourself into a better score if you were into that. But these are great. They kind of tell you percent body fat. You see right here, BMI, look at that, 28. I'm getting close to obese, and obviously there's some fluff there, but if you saw me in a t-shirt and shorts, you'd never think obese, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. All right, next we have my dream pieces someday, right? This is a DEXA scan. This uses x-rays to measure bone density, body fat, and tissue percentage, other things. This pro athletes, they're going to use things like this to get more information, but general public, people like me and you, once a year would be awesome, maybe, or something like that. And then you have down here, you have like bod pod. There's another dream device of mine. You're going to get, this uses like air pressure, and then you have hydrostatic weighing, which is like underwater. These are highly regarded in the industry. Universities have them. They're dream pieces of equipment, but not necessarily needed for me and you. But so these are our body composition metrics. These are you're going to want to use a couple of them. And if you're working with me, you are using progress pictures, you're using weight, and some of you may be using measurements or skin fold, or even some of my clients like have access to an Embody, and we use that once in a while too. So let's dive into our next, which is going to be the strength metrics. All right, if you watch my video on the fundamentals of strength training, I really dove into these, but I'm going to cover them again because there's a little bit different context around them. So strength metrics, these are very common to track, which is your sets, reps, and weight, which is basically load of resistance measured by intensity and volume. So I have a little example here. If you were to lift 100 pounds for 8 reps, that's 800, and then times it by the 3 sets you performed, there's your 2400 total volume. But volume is not everything, right? When we get into a maximal or submaximal lift, if we're lifting like 1 rep or anything under 6 reps, the intensity is higher. So we have to take that into account, and that's why most people test their true strength with a 1 repetition max, right? So this is super important. Anyone using progressive overload, anyone looking to see progress and strength gains needs to be tracking these things. You do never want to just go into a gym and just pick machines each week and decide what to lift, and maybe it's more than you did, maybe it's less. With consistency, you'll always see results in the gym, right, if we're consistent, but you are not being efficient with your time, so use this. All right, so form. Form is the way we would track form. Now, this is subjective, okay? So like certain lifters, certain research will tell you, like in an example right here, some professionals and research will show that you want to have your head up in a deadlift. Some people will say neutral, you want to be looking down, right? With that said, what's important more or less is posture and alignment during exercise. So form is an increased range of motion, could be a way to improve our form, or the improved movement pattern. So like right here we have a deadlift. You could see we have extreme flexion of our spine, this rounding. The bar sometimes is going to go, one of the most important things in a deadlift, we want to use leverage. So you want this bar as close to your midline as possible. The further away you get from your leverage point, the harder it is going to be to lift. So we want to be close to the midline of the body. And then some people though, as they come up around their back, this ends up looking more like this. And we want to be efficient. So rather than you being so focused on being stronger, it's what most of us in the gym focus on. What are you sacrificing to get there? Are we sacrificing our form to be able to lift that extra 5 pounds? Are we sacrificing tempo, which I'm about to dive into? What is being sacrificed? We want to diversify. The way I look at kind of progression in the gym and strength is you want to diversify how you're improving. We don't want to put everything just into stocks, right? That's high risk. If sets, reps, and volume, or sets, reps, and weight was the stocks, they can be highly volatile, especially picking an individual stock. If that stock goes up and up and up, right, there's a lot of risk, but there's a lot of reward. So you will get strong very fast if you're only focused on improving this metric right here. But you may start sacrificing your bonds, and you may be sacrificing, different industries here to get this. And what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket, eventually you're going to lead to this, you're going to get hurt. And so all these work synergistically. If the more we improve all of these together, not just focus on one or the other, overall, you're going to be stronger. You're going to bring up weak points. You're going to have good posture. You're not going to injure yourself. So I just want to kind of dive into that. And then we have also with form, it's range of motion. is also super important. So the improved movement pattern itself would be range of motion. Here's another example too in a squat, right? It's all context. Some people will tell you that you don't want your knees over your toes. Some people will tell you not. It's not so much about that. It's what are your goals? What is the performance that you're trying to achieve? And are you improving that? Okay. So, but knees should never valgus or cave in. All right. Then we have our squat, right? Now, this guy's only doing a quarter squat. What's the context? There's always potentially a reason. Maybe we're just looking on loading the bar as much as we possibly can to work our nervous system and prepare it for future lifts down here. But that's not important right now. The context mostly is if our goal is to lift 100 pounds for 8 reps over 3 sets, and we want to do it, and our first time doing it is this. This is what our squat looks like. When we get to, let's say we want to increase this to 200 pounds, we don't want to be going to here. This is not, we don't want to change our form to get there because it's not the same stimulus. We want to always try and maintain this, and we want to maintain our kind of our tempo, and I'll dive into that right now. So tempo / control is the speed of the resistance from points A to B. Different speeds produce different stimulus, including power, strength, hypertrophy. So I'm going to dive in here. Let's go to the next one. This is an example of someone lifting very specific to tempo. They are training tempo on purpose to elicit an effect. Most likely these people are trying to get hypertrophy or muscle growth. So you can see here they're doing 4 seconds of a negative, which is the eccentric, and then they're going a 2-second pause at the bottom, an isometric, and then they're coming up the concentric for 1 second, and then a pause for 1 second, and they're maintaining that tempo every single rep. They're not going to be nearly as strong if they're just pumping it up and down as fast as they could possibly go. And it all comes down to context. What matters for you is that if we are trying to lift this exact amount, 100 pounds, lifted for 8 reps for 3 sets, all of these need to stay these two need to stay exactly the same, along with this, which we'll get to, for it to be true progressive overload. If we sacrifice any of these to improve this, which it will happen, and that's okay, but as long as we are thinking about this, if we are always keeping this in mind and trying to maintain these things while improving these, that's where you're going to see true progressive overload and true progress, and you're going to see a lot of result. So next I'm going to dive into, this is kind of, we're bringing physics into it, and I'm just going to use this for the basic information that I want it to relay to you. So you have force velocity curve. Okay, force is just basically like how heavy you can produce, for like how much force you can produce, like a 1 rep max. So you see here 90 to 100% of 1 rep max, and then all the way on the other side, on the velocity side, this is at 30% of 1 rep max. This is as fast as you can lift it. So this would be like a max bench press to a speed bench press. All of these in a great program, and someone trying to build a well-rounded program and be a well-rounded athlete. This is my goal. This is what I try and provide for my clients to the best of their ability. You want this entire range of this curve trained in a program. Now, if you're a professional athlete, you have seasons, you have periods of only training the maximum side, and then you go through a period of only training this, or somewhere in between. We don't need to dive into that. What's important is that with this curve, the more force you're producing, and I get into this in my Fundamentals of Strength video, you cannot go as fast. It's not possible. The speed of the bar is going to be dictated by the force produced. So we just want to keep that in mind for the sake of tempo, is that when we're going to improve these metrics that everyone is always trying to improve, right? Weight, doing more reps and sets. we need to maintain these right here. All right, so next we're going to get into the neuromuscular connection, or the mind muscle is what we're known in the industry, which is the ability to feel the working muscle stretching and contracting. Another form that people kind of tie into is like blood flow or pump. And basically, all your human body, your skeletal frame is just lever points, and your muscles shorten and they pull and contract and they move the levers of the system. And your brain is sending signals to tell it what to do, what muscles to contract and move the lever points. That's all it really is. But for you specifically, when you train, what a lot of people don't realize when improving improving in the gym is, if I'm doing a squat, not only do I want to just be taking the bar from point A to point B and keeping good form and keeping great consistent tempo, controlled tempo, you want to be feeling the working muscle that you are contracting. We want to be in touch with our body. There's science to show that when your brain is actually connected with the muscle tissue, it sends a stronger signal. It will tell it to grow. So if you want bigger biceps, there is little hacks that you can do where you can cue your brain to have a stronger connection simply by resting your finger on your bicep and creating a secondary sensory input to that bicep, and that will improve growth. There's more science to it, but that's the basics of it. And so for you, this takes extreme amount of time. This takes years and years and years for the ability for you to become, basically to connect your brain to the tissue, your brain to body. This is a practice like meditation or any other, and this should always be on your mind, especially when we're in kind of the higher amount of volume or repetitions, the easier this is to do. So this is why I program, a maximal and submaximal, because in maximal it's force production and we're trying to get really, really strong. But in my accessory work or my hypertrophy work, our 8 to 12 or 8 to 15 rep range, in the beginning, it's all about being in touch with the muscle, creating that neuromuscular connection, that mind-muscle connection. And then as it gets heavier, what's going to happen is the weights get heavier and you fatigue. It's harder and harder to maintain that mind-muscle connection. It becomes more about you just putting your intention into getting the load, the weight, the resistance from point A to point B. So for all you guys working with me or watching this video, all of these have their reasoning, and you want to improve all of them. And that's why you want to work through different rep ranges and different amounts of sets and focus on negatives, which would be just certain exercises you're only focusing on coming down. And that's for later videos, but all of these are vitally important. So another example that I really like on this is a lot of people, when they're doing a deadlift, for example, like if we right here, a deadlift, because they sit at a desk all day long, the glutes become inactive, okay? And what happens is, because they're in a stretched position at all times, all day, they become inactive, and it's really hard for the mind-muscle connection, for your brain to send signal to the glutes. And so a lot of people start rounding their back and lifting this bar with their back because they can't create leverage at the hips by using the glutes. So what you can do, and this is why certain exercises are great for this, you can basically do isolation exercises of the glute. So like you have right here, just these bands. If you were to do these clamshells, your glutes would be on fire, like a burning sensation. And then you're creating that neuromuscular connection, that mind-muscle connection, to then know what muscles, if you know that the glute is supposed to be firing, you've now created that sensory input and the ability to put the brain to the muscle and all of a sudden your glutes start firing. So it's a great way to improve form is these isolated glute exercises. And when you're doing things properly, when all of these are aligned, you're going to see much better progress. And so really cool. And then last but not least, on the strength metrics. Okay, I dove into this in the fundamentals of strength. Rest intervals are vital for the success of progressive overload due to the energy reproduction of our cells. You cannot have variable energy levels when measuring progress. Okay, so what does that mean? Right here, basically your body, after you use energy, it reproduces energy. And everyone's different on the amount. These are just averages. But if you're lifting heavy weight, you're going to require more time to recover so that you could do multiple sets at a very high intensity. And when you're doing higher volume, where it's not as high of an intensity, you don't need as much recovery. Here's the important thing for you guys for this specific video, okay? Say you are lifting, trying to maintain this, and each week we want to progressively overload. We want to create a new stimulus every single week and be a little bit stronger. If these are not exactly the same, or at least close, every week, this 2 minutes and 93% recovered, it is not going to be equal to what you did last week. So, for example, if you lift 100 pounds for 8 reps, and then the next week, and you rested 2 minutes, so you recovered 93%. If you go in and start talking to someone or checking your phone on Instagram, and you end up in the 3 to 5 minutes, you're recovering more energy. Therefore, your tissue was not stronger at contracting that muscle. You just simply had more energy than the week before. Now, that's not necessarily oh my God, it's the end of the world problem, but these things all work synergistically together, and we want to keep every single one of these in check and accounted for and diversified and improve across the board. All of these things, and good programming and you knowing what you need to be working on is going to make that happen. So if you want kind of more detail and more science into these things, these strength metrics, I will link my fundamentals of strength video, but this video is taking a long time, and so I'm going to just dive into what's next. All right, so we have our cardiovascular and vitality metrics. So VO2 max is the maximum rate of oxygen your body can use during exercise. The higher your VO2 max, the more energy you can produce, similar to the horsepower in a motor. So not everyone is this is like the DEXA scan. This is, if you are really into performance and you have the goals, this is a great thing to use. But what's cool is wearable devices like Apple Watch, and this is a Whoop strap, they actually are always tracking data when you exercise, and they can give you, they're tracking your heart during your exercise, and they give you scores, basically your VO2 max via averages during all sets of exercise, aerobic exercise. And so what's really cool is, once again, how accurate is it? Obviously not as accurate as this, but can I improve it over time, or is it decreasing over time? So I use this on my Apple Watch. I love it. When I was working, you saw in my progress pictures that I made pretty substantial progress. My aerobic zone 2 work, I was highly effective in making that happen, and I saw this score go up. I was doing a lot of cardio, therefore my VO2 max went up. And so once again, what is the context of your goals? Yes, it might not be the most accurate, but is it improving over time? Is it a metric that you are tracking and seeing progress, and it's motivating? It makes you want to get up at 7 a.m. and go run stairs in a humid summer because you're seeing the progress. So super important. All right, resting heart rate. A low resting heart rate is associated with higher physical fitness, longer lifespan, and lower risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. These two, VO2 max and resting heart rate, And here's, there's numbers for where you should be. I'm not going to dive too much into it. What's important for you guys is that you like longer lifespan, lower risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. These are two key mortality predictors of how long you are going to live. There's so much research and data that shows that if you can get your resting heart rate down, you have such a higher chance of not getting sick as you get older and living a longer life. And I can't even begin to explain how easy it is to lower your resting heart rate. I mean, simply just walking every day will improve that. Everyone should be using this. And this metric, once again, you'll see kind of your averages. If it's going down over time, that's a great thing. You're seeing that your programming and your exercise is working, and you can see if it's not working. It's a key indicator also of like how much stress you take in during the day. So resting heart rate, vitally important. VO2 max, not as much, but it is great. All right, then we're going to dive into HRV, which is just heart rate variability, used to determine your body's ability to endure stress. It's basically nervous system readiness score. So HRV is really great if I do a conjugate system. The way I train is I have really heavy days and then I have speed days that are lower on my nervous system demand. The heavy days require a lot of my nervous system and they deplete it. So I track HRV using my Apple Watch, and I've used Whoop and things like that, Fitbit. It's not always going to be perfect, but if you're sleeping properly and you're doing these things that I'm going to get into and improving your HRV, it should match up. You should actually be able to track, like on my maximal performance day, my high CNS day, you should have a high HRV. You are ready to take on that stress. And then you'll see kind of the next day after I perform those heavy sets of squats and deadlifts, that the next day my HRV is actually lower and I would do a lower CNS day. So I might do an aerobic work or things that don't require as much as my nervous system, not as much demand. So HRV is really, really cool. It's not always going to be perfect. You may have a high CNS day scheduled or a heavy leg day scheduled and your HRV isn't perfect. Depending on who you are and what's your context, right? Are you a pro athlete or are you just an everyday person? You don't want to put too much stock into it, but once again, there's lots of metrics to use. The context of your goals matters on which ones you track. So heart rate variability, HRV, it's great. I love it. And it's simply just your heartbeats. They have a lot. I always used to think until I learned about HRV that the heartbeat just goes beep, 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 steady state. But you actually want fluctuation. So it'd be like beat, 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 beat. You want more fluctuation in your heartbeats. So another indicator of health. All right. I have a sleep video. I could dive into this. You have sleep stages, so I'm not going to go too far into it. But sleep, duration, and cycles, these are important for overall health. This is a metric that you can track through a wearable device by tracking your different stages of sleep. Each one does different things. Deep sleep is vitally important for tissue repair. So if you're like a bodybuilder or trying to see progress in the gym, you really want to have good deep sleep. All of them are important. Talk about diversification of different metrics like I did in strength. Same thing here. You have certain amounts of each one that you want to get. If you're tracking them, you can improve that over time using supplements, things like that. I have a whole video on it, so I'm not going to go too crazy into it. All right, next we're going to get into perceived energy. So these things are kind of 1 to 10 style tracking. It's subjective. You can't really you can't measure it per se. It's how you perceive it to feel that way. But these are important to follow. A lot of apps will actually allow you, like the Apple Health, I use that. If you want to track kind of your stress levels, your anxiety, your mood, things like that, they ask you every single day, how are you feeling? And then you can kind of see, even though it's how you perceive to feel, it might not be extremely accurate over time. You can see progress and you can see, am I overstressed? Am I handling too much? Is my meditation working? So I'll kind of group all these together: energy levels, stress and anxiety, perceived mood. they're all super important and you want to monitor them, but it's all the context of how much you want to track. So next, we're going to get into another 1 to 10, which is, your nutrition, but basically your hunger level. So you have leptin and ghrelin, and they're hormones that dictate your hunger level. So you can see here, ghrelin increases appetite, leptin decreases appetite. A lot of our food and highly processed, ultra processed foods, they have a lot of chemicals and things in them that really throw these off, along with artificial sweeteners. Everyone says they're perfect. I'm not here to fight that. I personally avoid them if I can because of the effect they have on this right here. If you're someone who struggled with overeating and eating too many calories, it's because you're always hungry, you're snacking. If you can get these in check, you're going to see a lot of progress. So it's one of, you can kind of 1 to 10 scale it. This is important. I use this with my clients. How are you feeling? Are you hungry? Is the nutritional plan that we're using, are you feeling satisfied? Are you needing to snack in between meals? So it's a great tool. All right, then you got your vitals. This would be like blood oxygen, blood pressure, respiratory rate. It's general physical. This is something you get with your doctor once a year. It's all context. Are you a healthy person? Everyone should be tracking these things occasionally. So I just kind of put them in there. And then we have the game changer. This is comprehensive blood work. This is a company, Ways to Well, in Austin, Texas. I use kind of theirs. Some of them are different on what they cover. I am not an expert on this by any means. I do not know what all these do. It's really about true health and knowing if your body is working synergistically among the entire system. Are there things out of whack? This is where you're going to see probably more result in any aspect of health, fitness, strength gains. These are so important. I mean, we have hormones like testosterone and estrogen. You have thyroid. You've probably heard of how your thyroid is out of whack, and that's why you're, gaining weight. Are you able to process glucose? That's kind of in your blood health, stress, your cortisol levels. So, not going to dive too much into it, but this is honestly, everyone should be doing this once a year. I am going to be, as I get more into videos and building my business and my clientele, it's something that in my future I hope to be able to offer, but something to take care of on your own. All right, a lot of information, super long video, but we're going to dive into kind of putting it all together. With so many metrics, picking the most applicable to your goals is essential. So an example like a strength recovery metrics would be more valuable if you're focused on powerlifting. So if I powerlift, I'm probably really focused on some of the metrics in strength, right? So if I powerlift, obviously progress pictures like vanity, I don't care too much about. I more or less maybe would care about like my body measurements. Are my arms growing, my legs growing, to make sure I'm gaining muscle if I'm in conjunction with a scale, based on like certain meets, right? If you do a powerlifting meet, there's weight classes. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining tissue, you're getting stronger without gaining too much weight, because it's how much you can lift relative to what you weigh. So you don't really care too much about these things. This is where a lot of your focus is going to be. Maybe not so much mind-muscle connection, but tempo creates stimulus. So they do a lot of speed work and a lot of maximal work. They do all these things. Form, super important to be tracking and making sure that it's improving so they don't get hurt when they're lifting insane loads. These are vitally important: sets, reps, weight. And then as we get down to here, obviously they probably don't care about running marathons or trying to get strong. So VO2 max might not be something that's so important unless they're elite. But like resting heart rate, is this weight they're putting on is this just constantly averaging higher and now they're kind of jeopardizing their lifespan? That might be important. But sleep, this is an extreme priority. HRV, this is an extreme priority to them. Are they ready for the stimulus they're going to put on their nervous system, right? The demand. And they probably don't care. They might care about mood, but you see what I'm saying. All right, cardiovascular and vitality metrics would be more valuable if you're focused on a long and healthy lifespan. If you are 45, you've put on 20 pounds of body fat, and you're just trying to be healthy, you don't care so much about how much you can lift, you're going to be really focused here. Our resting heart rate, our sleep, our energy levels, our stress, our mood, our nutrition, these things right here, super important to us. We'll probably here, we'll track this a little bit, but we're not trying to be professional athletes. We just want to be healthy. So these things are important, but not so focused. And then here, obviously, we want to bring our weight down. So we might be taking some progress pictures with a scale. We don't really need body fat percentages too much. We just want to live a long, healthy life. So context is really important. And the goal of this video is for you guys. If you work with me, we're going to talk about this and we're going to help decide what's good for you. But anyone watching, what's important to you and what do you want to improve, and focus on those metrics over time. Consistency is vital, so choose trackable metrics to improve that are already readily available and easy to follow. For example, if you want to be consistent with everything that you're trying to improve, if it's hard to get a VO2 max and it's hard to get a DEXA scan, you might not want to depend on those so much because you're not going to do them. So just choose things that you can use often. A scale, everyone has a scale, right? Taking pictures, everyone has a phone for the most part. So, and be consistent, schedule it. All right, utilize wearable devices like Apple Garmin, Samsung smartwatches, Whoop Strap, Oura Ring, Fitbit. Different devices focus on specific metrics, so it's essential to consider your goals when deciding on a device. Basically, Whoop Strap is, more focused on sleep. Like sleep and HRV are their biggest thing. Apple is more for the general public. It has all kinds of things, but it's known to not be as accurate with the sleep cycles as like the Oura Ring and the Whoop Strap. So it really comes down to what are your goals, and then when you're deciding on a device, if you don't have one already, pick the metrics that you want to follow and track, and then do a little bit of research and see what devices are best at tracking those things. And then lastly, progressive overload applies to everything discussed, and formulating a specific plan to improve your essential metrics will ultimately lead to success. Progressive overload, I will have video. I don't have video yet, but I will have a video just on progressive overload. But it's basically just measuring everything you do, any type of these metrics, and improving it over time. And so if we look here, a lot of people get frustrated. You see, this is results and this is time, and everyone thinks progress just goes up, but there's actually a lot of waves, like a stock chart. And in the beginning, you'll see immediate progress because anything works if you make changes, but then you get into this little area right here where you've been working for a while and you don't see improvement. But if you stay consistent and you have been progressively overloading and slowly overloading consistently over time on the metrics that you set a goal to improve, eventually they all come to fruition, and you're going to see results way over here. So this is a really cool little picture, and patience and consistency are the key to all success. So a lot of information. Hope this was valuable for you guys. These are most of the metrics I use with my clients, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if this was helpful. All right, thanks guys.